Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to say Tunis should be ruled on the pure laws that Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh radiallahu anh founded it on? Go read who Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh is and what his relationship to Tunis was. Let's not fool ourselves. Let's not lie to ourselves. If you want victory from the heavens, start by showing Allah Islam on this earth. Then watch the victory hail on you. This is not mythical. This is not mythical and fairy tale. This is the sunan and rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the simple, basic rules of Allah, the super basic rules of implementing the tawheed of Allah on His earth were not established, do we really expect victory to send upon us from the heaven? Who are we trying to fool? We don't have Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam amongst us. We don't have the Sahaba amongst us. And not establishing the full laws of Allah that they chose for us on this earth is a little bigger of a misinterpretation than what the archers did when they got off the hilltop in the presence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Why all this? Is it fear of displeasing both internal and external characters or forces or armies or countries or nations or groups? Just look at the result of that. Look at the result that we foresaw before anything happened. من أرضى الناس بسخط الله سخط الله عليه وأسخط عليه الناس. ومن أرضى الله بسخط الناس رضي الله عنه وأرضى عليه الناس. Sunan al-Tirmidhi. Whoever seeks the pleasure of Allah at the risk, there was a risk, they should have took that risk, seeks the pleasure of Allah at the risk of displeasing people, Allah will be pleased with a promise. Does Allah fulfill His promises? Allah will be pleased with him and will make people pleased with him. Promise from Allah. Listen, and this is exactly what happened here, the second part of the hadith. But whoever seeks the pleasure of people at the risk of displeasing Allah, Allah will abandon him, will be displeased up at him, and will make the people abandon him and be displeased at him. Sunan al-Tirmidhi. The benefit, all the benefit, is living under the shade of the legislation of the one who knows best what suits us. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ. The fitna, all the fitna, is living under man-made laws in countries that were founded on La ilaha illallah. You hear the rags who call themselves shuyukh encouraging Muslims to accept secular states. Does a Muslim, let alone a sheikh, even talk like that? Since when do Muslims talk like this? And a leader? Our enemy doesn't need enemies. Our ummah doesn't need enemies. When we got the Ruwaybidah, the rags calling the rule of Allah a fantasy. The rule of Allah in the Quran is a fantasy. Application of Allah's laws in Muslim countries is a fantasy. For one who suckled Islam from the intelligence of the West, yes, it's a fantasy. The Quran I memorized, and every single tafsir I read and studied by ijma' says something way different from what those rags, those ruwaybidah say. Let him and his foolish audience go open any of the mothers of the tafsir and tell me what the mufassirin said about these ayat. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكَ على شريعة من الأمر فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد ضل ضلالا مبينا إنا أنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق لتحكم بين الناس بما أراك الله ولا تكن للخائنين خصيما إن الحكم إلا لله يقص الحق وهو خير الفاصلين ما لهم من دونه من ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا. In tens more of ayat and hadith. That's a fantasy. The Ruwaybidah, they think the hudud, they're fools. They think the hudud are all that it is in Islam. Like cut in the hand or zina punishment. That's part of the Shari'ah of Allah. But they make it like that's the only thing. The Ruwaybidah don't know that's a small portion, a small percentage of the rule of Allah. Islam has an entire economic system to be proud of. That must be established in our lands. If they want to succeed in every aspect, it has laws and rules. Muhyiddin al-Qurra, contemporary man, wrote a contemporary book on the laws, Islamic laws of debt and laws of stocks and bonds and investments and many other matters and details pertaining to Islam's economic. It's not just about, that's part of it. It's not just about cutting the hand and hudud and ridda. Contemporary books that talk in depth and detail about Islam's Islamic economic laws, Al-Dabbu wrote about it. Abu al-A'la al-Mawdudi wrote about it. Al-Ayadi wrote about it. Al-Badawi, Ismail ibn Ibrahim al-Badawi wrote about it. And tens others wrote about the Islamic laws in Sharia and finance. It's not just about cutting the hand and the ridda that they have an issue with. It's an entire way of life. Islam has labor law. You know what's funny? Is sometimes there's Islamic laws, some of them are broad and encompass the discretion of a Khalifa or whoever he appoints, and sometimes they may be like non-Muslim laws. The Ruwaybida would be willing to praise and glorify it as laws of Islam, but not because it's laws of Islam, because it's laws of others. No pride. No pride. After I finished Medina, I returned here and got a master's degree in law. It's called the LLM. Specifically, actually, when you go in a master's degree in law, you got to choose an area. Mine was in labor law. My thesis was on aspects of labor law in Islam. The professor who became interested in Islam, he used to sit me for hours and hours asking questions about Islam. This was before the internet era where they could look up stuff and check about Islam. It wasn't widespread back then. I remember one time he said, those references you've been using in this thesis, how old are they? I said, well, the verses I used and the hadith that I used, they're about 14 centuries old. They were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ 14 centuries ago. But the rest of the books were approximately 400 years ago, 700 years ago. I believe the most recent one was maybe 400 years ago. We went on talking for months and months. He told me at one time, I'm surprised such in-depth details of laws haven't dominated the world. And all I thought, it was just a small thesis on a few issues of labor law. That's a non-Muslim, but the Ruwaybida undermine the Islamic law legislated by Allah. Oh, it's just a 4 or 5 hudud, secular, defeatist mentality. There's an economic system, there's a labor system, there's an entire way of life in the laws of Allah. The law of Shari'ah tells a leader how and in what limits and capacity he deals with his neighboring countries. He has to know how. That comes from the laws of Allah. The laws of non-Muslim under Muslim rule, Ahl al-Dhimma. I mentioned a brief illustration for those of you who attended in the lecture when we talked about defending the Prophet ﷺ when they made the movie about him, and many non-Muslims took their shahada after that. We talked about something about Ahl al-Dhimma in Jizya, and I can go on and on. It's an entire way of life from the cradle to the grave. Don't listen to those Ruwaybida, or it's a few hudud, and Muslims accept secular law, secular systems. The soil and dirt in Muslim lands rejected legislation by other than Islam. The soil and dirt. What has the rule of other than Allah brought to our lands except fitan and bloodshed and oppression and massacres? The earth rejected it. The earth doesn't want it. The ground, the dirt, the stones don't want it. Lands that were irrigated with the blood and sweat of the Sahaba resist other than La ilaha illallah. And the hard hearts of some who claim to be scholars resist the rule of Allah. Every ideology and system of laws, or that which they call values, has proven to be a failure on our lands. Its text is a failure, and its practice is a bigger failure. How about we try the rules of Allah now? What do you guys think? Wallah al-Azim. Our texts are infallible. It's the Quran, the Wahy. And the practice has proven to be the most successful.